America First does not mean an isolationist policy. America First is putting the interests of Americans ahead of any other nation, and sometimes that does mean getting involved. But it means having their best interest first and foremost, and not making deals that don't make sense for us. But yes, sometimes there is international
that means
invention.
taking $20 billion and bailing out Argentina when farmers are actually suffering because Argentina is doing business with China, and we are in a trade war with China, and they've stopped buying our soybeans.
Abby Phillip on her CNN show went up against a couple of MAGA pundits over the idea of America First. This claim from MAGA that Donald Trump is all about America First when he's giving tens of billions of dollars to Argentina, when he's bombing Venezuela. Can you really call that America First? We're going to take a look at clips from Abby Phillip's show as she goes up against MAGA. I want to share my thoughts on this as well. Let's check this out together.
Welcome back. The America First crowd has another bad week as the shutdown drags on and President Trump fires thousands of federal workers as punishment. He promised Argentina a $20 billion bailout if his preferred candidate wins, a move that many American farmers say is a slap in the face. Trump even admitted it. It doesn't help the United States. And as he escalates his strikes on boats from Venezuela, he confirmed that he authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations inside that nation.
Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. And the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela.
You know, for a president who ran on this sort of anti-interventionist, he's actually argued against this sort of regime change, nation building policy. And yet that's kind of what we're seeing. In addition to that, also a bailout of a foreign country at the expense of American farmers. I don't know. I mean, is it surprising?
Well, it's a really weird week for him to disclose covert operations in a foreign country, a week in which his administration is prosecuting the former national security advisor for allegedly leaking classified information. But I'll put that to the side for a second. What worries me, Abby, is right now the administration's not being held accountable for these strikes in Venezuela. I warned 3 years ago that White House officials wanted to go engage, and they asked us about whether they could do missile strikes against unarmed individuals in boats in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, that set off alarm bells because our lawyers said that would be inconsistent with the rules of engagement and the laws of war. And right now, I've not seen any information out of this White House that what they are doing is consistent with the rules of engagement and the laws of war. And in fact, the people who've been pushing back in the military, we found out this week, are getting pushed out of the Pentagon.
So let me tell you, I've never been a CIA operative, but it strikes me as a little weird that if you are going to authorize covert CIA operations in a foreign nation for regime change purposes, you would be announcing it and confirming it in the press. That's just, to me, that makes no sense. And it reminded me, actually, of Trump first term when John Bolton was seen holding a notepad that talked about the number of troops that were on the Colombian border, and it drove Venezuelans to think that there was going to be regime change coming from the United States imminently. Look, let me just say this.
I gotta jump in here.
Nicolas Maduro is one of the worst people that has ever lived. Okay, and he stole an election. That election was won by the Venezuelan opposition. Nicolas Maduro is a cruel dictator. What I don't understand is how Donald Trump, on the one hand, can be saying, because Nicolas Maduro, that I agree with, is a horrible dictator, we're going to do regime change, but at the same time, he is removing temporary protective status from hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans who have fled that cruel, oppressive dictatorship.
So real quick, Anna, I mean, you're no fan of Maduro, but
no, I detest him.
Right, to put it mildly. I mean, but
and
are
Ortega
you,
and anybody, the acolytes of Castro.
If there were a regime change effort, would you back it?
I'm very torn on this because I've actually gone through regime change, right? I was born in Nicaragua. I saw Carter influence the ouster of Somoza in Nicaragua and bring in the Sandinistas. I want to see my Venezuelan brothers and sisters live in freedom. I don't know what comes of a regime change from the United States like we saw in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. A lot of times those things did not work out.
The history of that is very fraught.
I got to jump in here because I feel like we're living in the twilight zone. We're talking about that this was a bad week for America First policy. Trump brokered a ceasefire deal in the Middle East. Hamas put down weapons. The hostages were released. And we're not going to talk about that. That is the biggest foreign policy victory that we have seen in this entire administration. And that deserves more mention than Argentina or Venezuela or any other country.
That happened a week ago and we talked about it then. But to the question of Trump running as an America First candidate and engaging in military strikes that he didn't go to Congress to authorize. He claims that there is a war going on between the United States and the cartels. He also is bailing out a foreign country. How does that strike you as a conservative?
Well, I would say that there is absolutely a war.
Let me just give
America First. America First does not mean an isolationist policy. America First is putting the interests of Americans ahead of any other nation, and sometimes that does mean getting involved. But it means having their best interest first and foremost, and not making deals that don't make sense for us. But yes, sometimes there is international
that means
invention.
Taking $20 billion and bailing out Argentina when farmers are actually suffering because Argentina is doing business with China, and we.
So a couple of points here, and Abby Phillip brings up a great point. You know, is America First giving billions of dollars? She says 20 billion. I've seen the number of 40 billion. I think that's increased to 40 billion. I don't know if that's correct or not, but they probably won't get into it on CNN. But the whole idea of bailing out Argentina is because some very rich people, including some billionaire Republican donors, invested in Argentina in this libertarian lunatic in Milei, and they lost their money. So guess what? Donald Trump is bailing those people out with our tax dollars. And when the MAGA people talk about, oh, you know, these have to be deals that are good for the United States, they're not deals that are good for you and me. They're deals that are good for the super rich. And with Venezuela, Trump lies, the MAGA pundits lie about all Venezuela is bringing all these drugs into the United States. It's not true. It's a very small percentage of the drugs in the United States come from Venezuela. But it all has to do with a particular resource that Venezuela has that Donald Trump wants. Again, is that going to benefit you and me? Probably not. It never seems that the price of that resource ever comes down. And in terms of the Middle East, that's already falling apart. So to proclaim what a great victory that was, it's just not true. So all of the stuff about America First and anti-globalist and all of this with Donald Trump, that was all just stuff that he said to get elected. And the MAGA pundits are still spouting that when it's not true.
We are in a trade war with China and they've stopped buying our soybeans. Then that $20 billion is, you know, a little over half of the cost of what it would take to, you know, extend the subsidies for millions of Americans whose healthcare costs are going to go up.
I think
that's America First.
Abby, I think that the comment you made that America is in a supposed war with the cartels, any family in this country who's lost someone in their family to fentanyl use would absolutely agree with President Trump that we are, in fact, at war with the cartels.
But the reason
and
I said it that way,
they would appreciate the president taking every action he can to stop the flow.
What do you think more Americans are thinking about? Their health care that they could lose, or it could be completely unaffordable for them, or linking Venezuela to deaths of their family members from fentanyl? I would say that there's a whole lot more Americans who are concerned about the healthcare costs and looking directly at the fact that if these subsidies go away, they or their family could lose their health care, rather than doing these mental gymnastics to determine that Venezuela, that provides a very small percentage of the drugs that the United States gets, around 10% is what I've read, that killed their family member.
The reason I said it that way is because 99% of the fentanyl that comes into this country comes from Mexico. It does not come from Venezuela. So if Trump is saying we are in a war against the cartels to stop drug trafficking, that war would be with the Mexican cartels, not with fishermen coming on boats out of Venezuela. So I'm just asking for a real justification that I think we ought to ask for every president when they start dropping bombs around the world. For what is the actual reason? Do we actually know who these people are? Do we know that they're even Venezuelans? Because some of them reportedly were from other countries. And when we start bombing citizens of other countries, we don't want other countries bombing our citizens in international waters. So What are the rules of engagement?
Well, I don't think that are Americans bringing drugs from the United States into South America by boat, which is what we're seeing now. But I want to address a few points that you made. On the Mexican border, first of all, the president has designated several Mexican drug cartels as of terrorists of our country, and there are special forces elements on the ground addressing those.
He's not bombing them.
He is, because that's a little bit of a different scenario when you talk about bombing right next door in Mexico and what they're doing in Venezuela. But the president is actually taking action, decisive action. Many Americans appreciate it, certainly those families that have been impacted by fentanyl.
So I think this is great work from Abby Phillip, and I think this is pretty rare to see on the 24-hour news networks or the big three news networks, to have a host on the show like Abby Phillip saying, is this really in our best interest? Can the president just indiscriminately just be bombing ships without, I'm paraphrasing a bit on what she said, but without permission of Congress? Is this really America first when 99% of the drugs are coming from Mexico and not Venezuela? And when this money is being spent elsewhere, and then we're being told, oh, we don't have the money for healthcare subsidies, we got to tighten our belts. You know, we have all this debt, but yet we can give $40 billion to Argentina and whatever these bombings are costing around the world. I don't think regular Americans are really buying this as America first anymore. But let me know what you think about all this. Do you agree with what Abby Phillip had to say? Do you agree with what Ana Navarro had to say? Do you agree with what the two MAGA pundits had to say on all of this? Is any of this America first in your mind? Should we be not isolationist, but yet focusing more on our people at home who need help? That's my opinion anyway. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I am Chris on Culture, and I'll see you in the next video.